and welcome to Generation Gap. This is a mini episode for our YouTube channel. Today we are going to be discussing a feminist topic of rape culture. Here with me in the studio is Ashley and Sarah, and we're going to be answering some questions, general questions, and get a better idea of what rape culture is and what we can do about it. I'm going to start off the conversation about defining rape culture. So what is rape culture?
Rape culture is a set of beliefs, cultural beliefs and attitudes that tend to normalize rape in society and also justify the actions of the rapists and tend to blame the victim for the rape.
Okay. So your personal views on rape culture, what is like a general idea you have about it?
Well, for me, whenever I first heard of the term rape culture, it was just kind of something that kind of made sense, like clicked with me, because it is something that you can see everywhere, all the time in media, and just, with like statistics like 1 in 3 women being sexually assaulted, it's pretty obvious that we live in a rape culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that rape culture is something that our society kind of tries to hide almost. And so I think that it is a super real thing, and that we need to not push it under the rug as if it doesn't happen, because it's happening all the time.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we touch on how it is a feminist issue, because sometimes you think of something being a feminist issue and then something being an issue of rape culture. They are not separate things, that they are linked because of intersectionality, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. I also want to touch on rape myths, that rape culture is a myth. So if you want to touch on that.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. So to your first question, which was?
The first question?
Yeah.
That it is a feminist issue.
Right.
That's not, it is linked.
Right. Okay. So rape culture as a feminist issue. Rape is basically about control and power and domination. So from the perspective of a rapist, you're wanting to dominate the woman or victim in ways. There are several ways that rapists do this, whether it's through objectification, commodification of the female body. So in those ways that rape culture is a feminist issue.
And what are your views on it being a myth, rape culture being a myth?
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of myths out there about rape. One of the main ones being that rapists are only violent strangers who are lurking in the shadows in the night when, someone is walking home or something like that, and they jump out of the bushes and attack you. But in reality, over 50% of rapes are committed by either an acquaintance or an intimate partner. So that's one myth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As well as a lot of the times people think that it only has to do with something that's super violent, whereas rape is not just violence. It can be something that is very relational, and something that we don't
That's okay. We don't really think about the mental aspect of it. We just think of the physical contact.
Right.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Rape is definitely not always a violent attack. It can be just as psychologically or mentally violating as physical. It doesn't have to be purely physical.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the intersectionality concept of rape culture. And I'm going to start with defining intersectionality. So what is intersectionality?
Okay, intersectionality is basically saying that there are different forms of oppression societally, whether it's based on your gender, race, class, things like that. But these forms of oppression all are interlinked and interconnected.
Okay. So it's not just one aspect. It's not just about race. It's not just about age. One of the intersectionalities that have been discussed is the intersectionality of rape culture and media. So can you describe that relation?
Sure. There's definitely an intersection with rape culture and media, especially with the age of technology that we are living in. There have been many now documented instances of sexual assault, sexual violence, rape that have been documented via social media with a cell phone and shared on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. So there is definitely a connection between social media and rape culture in that way.
And social media and rape culture, it's such a bad thing because it almost enforces the culture of rape, and it almost enforces, people are doing this, so it's normal, when in reality it's not at all.
Is there any positives of these documented cases of rape?
Absolutely. One positive from the documentation of these instances is that it can help in the legal system with convicting rapists who have documented their attacks. It makes it a lot easier down the line whenever you're dealing with the courts and the legal system.
Okay, so going along with the legal system, I like to jump down to the legality of rape. So what do you think constitutes rape? Does that go along just like with the definition? Is it a clear-cut definition?
It's absolutely not a clear-cut definition. Did you want
to? Sure. So I would say that it's not clear at all that we in this culture, see victims or survivors as just being female, when oftentimes it's not gender specific. And like we mentioned earlier about different things with like domestic violence and things, that has very little, that's not the general, like what people think of that constitutes rape. So I would say that it's not clear cut. People are uncertain as to what actually constitutes rape.
Definitely. Also, I think that generally people think about rape as, also we were saying earlier, something that is always a violent attack by somebody you don't know. And this is not the case. And rape is not always forcible. It's not always coercion, but it occurs whenever an individual does not or is incapable of offering their explicit consent.
So going right into the next question of their explicit consent of yes means yes and no means no, and not saying no does not mean yes. Just because the victim, survivor, does not say no, they do not want to have sexual relations, that doesn't mean yes, they do want to.
Yeah, I think that's a really important part that we often forget about or overlook. Just because somebody is not saying no does not mean yes. It does not mean they want to. It might mean that they're uncomfortable in the situation and they don't know how to respond, so they don't. And that's oftentimes interpreted as a yes. And that's definitely something that people should be aware of. Just because somebody isn't saying no does not mean that they want to have sex with you.
Yeah, and you also have the right to change your mind about it. If you say yes earlier, but then decide, no, I don't really want to go home with you, that is 100% acceptable. And the yes from earlier is negated. It is whatever right now, I don't want to have these relations with you, so I'm not going to.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's super important too. Also that consent is an ongoing conversation. So just because you had relations with somebody in the past does not mean that you don't have to give a yes again for the next time. Each time requires an enthusiastic yes.
So with the definition of enthusiastic consent, at the time of said interaction between two people, if it is a sober, sound mind, yes.
Yes.
That means yes.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you said that because that's another important part of consent is that it's sober. Any person who is under the influence of any drugs or alcohol are not physically or mentally able to give consent.
That's a very good point. So you brought up being under the influence of drugs and alcohol, and we do think of more of the younger generation having that issue of being under the influence of something and coming in contact with these violent issues. So I want to go into if there are some specific examples, specifically college-related, about these instances that you can think of that you'd like to bring up.
Sure. I do know that even just on IUP's campus, there have already been at least 4 reported cases of sexual assault on campus already this semester. It's kind of becoming an epidemic on a lot of campuses, sexual assault and rape and sexual violence. And I know in one instance, in I believe Columbia University, a student was raped, and the university was being very inactive about it. So this individual carried around her mattress, a mattress that she was raped on, and carried it around campus with her, and other students, began helping her, and it turned into this whole kind of symbolic gesture of, if you're not going to help me, I'm going to take this into my own hands.
Yeah, that's a very good example. That is easy to look up online. Just type in Columbia University, I'm sure it will come up. So going along with that, since the campus was inactive about it, what can you tell me about victim blaming?
It's very common. It's very common, and basically victim blaming is just what it sounds like, that whenever a victim or survivor comes forward about an experience of rape or sexual assault, the blame is then imposed upon them, saying, you drank too much, your outfit was too revealing, basically that your actions constituted the rape, and that excuses the actions of the rapist in turn. And so also then when this happens, it kind of discourages other victims from coming forward.
Yeah, people won't want to say that this happened to them because they're afraid that nobody will do anything about it.
Right. It is a very pressing subject, and it does exist. Unfortunately, we are out of time, so just going back and reflecting on the conversation that we just had, I think it is important to educate ourselves on the subject. It is very easy to go online and find out information about rape culture and the legality of everything, and even help centers. For those of you watching, there are websites to go to. IUP has a counseling center. The number is 724-357-2621, and they can give you all the help that you are looking for. And I'm sure there's a lot of information online everywhere to everyone who's watching on YouTube. I'd like to thank Ashley and Sarah for coming in and talking about this topic. I know it's a tough thing to talk about, but we do need to talk about it. I'm Alex with Generation Gap. Be sure to look us up on Facebook and Instagram. And as always, IUP TV will be on there as well. Thank you for watching.